Yes, today we are going to talk about one of the favorite thinkers, that is Levi-Strauss. And Levi-Strauss is one of rare thinkers uh, whom idea is very much significant, not only for sociology but also anthropology, even literature, right? There is a school called structuralism, right? So Levi-Strauss is also important for the students who study literature. So Levi-Strauss lived a long life, very productive life from 1908 to 2009, almost uh, 101 years. And he was an influencer French anthropologist and philosopher who worked in the structuralist tradition. And Nikita is asking social structure का definition बता दो. डियर स्टूडेंट, ये यूजीसी का रिवीजन क्लास हो रहा है, तो सोशल स्ट्रक्चर का तो डेफिनेशन पता होना चाहिए. Social structure is a wave of social network in which people of a definite community lived in a definite time, definite space. Right? So patterned relationship is called social structure. Okay. So Claude Levi-Strauss is important because of his deep anthropological insight, and he never claimed himself a philosopher, although his idea is very much uh, useful for philosophical insight. Uh, he called himself anthropologist, and truly, uh, his observation is culminated one of his favorite book called Tristic Tropius, Tristeques. Yes, and that is one of the revolutionary work, I would say, because in terms of stardom, जैसे फिल्मों में हीरो का स्टारडम होता है, उसी तरह से कोई फिल्म जब हिट कर जाती है तो हीरो का स्टारडम आ जाता है. तो वही ये जो कंट्रीब्यूशन है, उसके आने के बाद ही बिकेम ए काइंड ऑफ स्टालवर्ट in the field of anthropology. So structuralism is a kind of school of thought, is a paradigm, is a conceptual framework. Structuralism has been defined as a search for the underlying patterns of thought in all forms of human activity. So, right from the beginning of his career, uh, uh, C. Levi-Strauss was very much interested to understand the invariant aspect of reality. How order is maintained, sustained, right? So, he has a deep interest of understanding social structure, understanding language for that matter, right? So social structure is a concrete reality. It cannot be seen, and what we see in the model of social structure, we can understand the structure without considering its function. That is why he was very uh, much emphasis on the structure rather than function, right? And he called himself a structural linguistic, right? So according to Levi-Strauss, um, uh, we can study the entirety of society without considering its function, but only by understanding the structure, right? So uh, uh, Levi-Strauss was very much influenced with the work of Roman J.K. Son, you know, and he was also was a Russian poet and another exile from Russia, and so the texture of structuralist linguistics he learned from him, and also one of the Swiss scholar called Ferdinand de Saussure, right? He was a great structuralist, and his one statement is very important for him. Saussure said, "Language is not that something that we use. Language shapes us." Right? So it was Swiss linguist Saussure, who was a kind of structuralist linguistic. He approached language as a system. And in previous class, I taught you about Saussure, you know, his conception of sign and signifier, you know, signifier and signify. So the signifier is the concept, right? And the signifier is the way we express that concept, right? So signified is the concept, and signifier is the way we express the concept. Like dog, the word dog is signifier, and the concept of a dog is the corresponding signified. So Saussure would argue that the relationship between signifier and signified is arbitrary. Right? So there is nothing inherent in the concept of dog that determines that we should call it dog. And yet, the concept dog has no meaning apart from our usage of the word dog. So, how then does the concept come to the meaningful? The meaning is important. What is meaning? Saussure said, meaning comes from the science place in the system of science and how it differs from other science, right? So the concept of dog becomes meaningful because we understand it in relation to other concepts like cat, like a rat, like mouse, right? So and so. So what I want you to make you understand is that language is nothing more than a system of signs in which every sign stands in a relation to opposition or distinct from other signs, right? So together those relations give meaning to the word we use, right? So, and for philosophy also, uh, mm, uh, uh, a structuralist C. Levi-Strauss is very important, particularly if you 1950 and 1960, there was a kind of philosophical hegemony or a kind of uh, dominant expression of philosophy was existentialism, and Jean-Paul Sartre and all, Simona de Beauvoir for that matter. So uh, uh, it was C. Levi-Strauss who gave a kind of good counter exposition of the thought of Jean-Paul Sartre. So a kind of critique, you can also understand C. Levi-Strauss conception of structuralism as a critique of existentialism for that matter. And one another important distinction of Saussure, which was being conceived by Saussure, and also John C. Levi-Strauss is Susro's distinction between uh, uh, Perlu and Lengu. Uh, this is one of the important. What is parole? Parole is one uses the language as it is used everywhere, uh, uh, every day. That is to say, the language of motion. Uh, Langue. Log is the structure of the language which dictates the working of uh, parole, right? So the language between language and parole is much like between uh, like the uh, rules of cricket and particularly a game of cricket. So the rules provide a structure that gives uh, meaning and order that individual moves in a particular game of cricket. In the same way, the long provides the structure of the language within which our day-to-day interaction occur and derive their meaning, right? So both of the differentiation of uh, uh, parole and league and sign and signifier is important. That is very important because then you understand the what is latent behind the empirical, right? So there is a science which talks about empiricism, and there is a science which talks about the hidden part of empiricism. So structuralism is a kind of, it is a way of perceiving the human world in terms of a structure, and that is already familiar to us when we look at the physical world, right? Uh, its core, one of the core thought of structuralism is the belief that this human world is subject uh, to such a uh, long, and that we can discard this structure.